All right, welcome back, engineers, and we are with you is your host Ndolo and Engineer Mativo as the speaker, presenting on a small mini PIP and procedures and steps and some guidelines on how to get your professional status under the Engineers Act of 43 of 2011 in Kenya. And we finished with engineer presenting giving some guidelines of how to go about everything, right from writing, the briefness, the detailedness of the information that you're giving, not just naming that you are involved in sightseeing, but naming exactly what you did during those processes of the sightseeing. And he also really mentioned something that many people don't really do, that is decency. When you have to dress decently and also be ready to read your documents in advance so that you can, I think it's like any other interview that you've ever attended, which always starts with the introduction, and you are given a time limit, maybe 10-15 minutes. You have to follow those the way it is precisely. And then I think one thing I also got when I attended PIP sometime back 2016 involves like not just the brevity of the document and the conciseness of it, but also how can I put it? The grammatical errors that many of us do have. So that one has to be looked. You have to try to look at it and read it through. He also mentioned about graduate engineers trying to have a logbook or some diary where they record everything they do, and at least with their mentors, they make sure that every quarterly they have a sort of a meeting or follow-up of how they're writing the report and how they're proceeding. And I like something that Engineer Ohaga once mentioned in the previous webinars during the elections. He said the process can actually take some 243 days. So if you are really committed to engineering. So with that few remarks, let's start with this session and have questions. At least I'll try to limit everybody to at least one question, because we have 30 members, and we don't want to, at least members should be able to catch the evening news at 9, so that you get to know what is going on in, especially with the pandemic that it's going around on coronavirus and COVID-19. So let's limit everybody to one question, and be clear and brief, please. Welcome. Anybody with a question? Abdi? Abdi? Muhammad? Sambu? Chege? Cynthia? All right. Okay, Kibe?
Thank you, sir. My question is, part 1 of the report requires one to have a maximum of around 2,000 words, yeah? 2,000 to 2,500 words, yeah?
Correct, yes.
So if one details, for example, in detail, what you, for example, you have been in maybe 3 or 4 projects, and every project has had its own problems or other details. So my question is, unless, for example, it's the main project which you are presenting, you cannot be able to detail every detail, or rather to the specifics of what you encountered in every in every project, as
Yes.
you have outlined, that one needs to be precise, not just only list what he did. For example, site visit, if for example, just listing, I went for a site visit, yeah. So if you detail every activity, the word count will be exceeded. What do we do about that?
Okay, thank you, Jacob, for that comment. What I was saying, you have to respect the number of words that are given in the guidelines. That's one of the things you have to stress. The second thing, always remember that most of the panelists are fairly well experienced people, and therefore the description of what you want to say doesn't have to be in too many words. Thirdly, always select, I want you to put your best foot forward. So you might have gone through X number of challenges, but the one you want to impress the panelist might be one or two. So not everything goes to the report, but to me, your logbook should have everything that you have done. But the report, please select what fits within the words and keep it in a very brief way that the panelists will definitely understand what it is. The good thing about keeping it brief is that you're almost like baiting the panelists to ask you a question on this one here. So if you give, you don't have to describe everything, but just describe enough information so that as a panelist, I'll say, oh, this sounds very interesting. Why don't I ask Jacob a question on this one here? That's now at the time you go into more details. So you don't have to write each and every point in your report, but just give me enough data to understand, to get a good picture of that this person knows what they're talking about or has undergone this, but for me also to ask you a question. Yeah, so you have to just balance.
Hello?
Dondolo?
Yes. There's another question here. Somebody is saying, how can the report be compiled for common case of a graduate engineer being involved with several companies and may not cover all phases of a project with one company? I think he's talking about maybe those who are doing contracts, small areas, like one will be on the design, another one will be on the implementation, another will be something like that. So how can one do that document compilation?
Okay, first, somebody has to go to, because you're required to give us your experience from the time you graduated. So that has to be there. And secondly, one thing I should stress, all the experience does not have to be the same project. I understand some projects you might have done more supervision. Other projects, maybe the only thing that you did was to prepare the tender documents and the bid documents. So they might end up being in different projects or different employers. That has to be captured separately and where it fits in. So a project, at no time are you required, or is it a mandatory that one project has to show evidence that you did everything from planning to preparing bid documents, to contract documents, all the way to commissioning? It doesn't have to be in one project. Some projects are going to be in piecemeal. Here is where you have the experience. That's where you're going to have the experience. But the most important thing is that when I go through your document, I want to get the impression that this person understands what it takes to do some form of planning, what it takes to do some form of design, what it takes to do contract management, what it takes to do the construction supervision and related things. Then the other things that are related, whether they've done geotechnical or topo survey, whether they've done monitoring evaluation, project management, etc. that goes. So it doesn't have to be in one project, but it can be, it's now how you present the whole document. In the end, we get this picture about you.
All right. And then how does the project, can somebody present, like, for example, I have a project that I did in 2012. Can it be presented now? Or is it?
No, it will be, I think the guidelines talk, is it 5 years? I have to confirm, but I think there's a time limit.
There's a time limit.
Yeah, there's a time limit.
All right.
Yes.
So then somebody must adhere to that within the time limits that is given there.
Yes.
All right. Abdi?
Engineer, I have only 2 questions for you. The first question is, what happens to those people who are in a job whereby they're only doing maintenance? And let's say someone works for Kenyan and he's in the maintenance department and he has worked there for, let's say, 5 or 6 years. What happens to such kind of people who don't have the design aspect and these other parts of aspects? And my second question is, why can't we now have samples of the best performing, what do you call these, the best performed project and training reports, so that now we can have samples of each and every area, maybe for the civil, for the for structures, for, let's say, these other areas, so that we can get good guidance.
Okay, Abdi, thank you for those two questions. The first one regarding, you gave an example, if somebody was employed in a company, whether it's Kenyan or other company, that from the one they're employed to do operation maintenance, that's a good example that you've given. One of the things, and as I said earlier, when I give a disclaimer, I'm not speaking on behalf of, because I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of IEK and EBSK. But what I'll give from my experience and having, when I joined the panel, that is one of the first questions that we asked. And the Kenyan system requires that somebody must have some basic understanding of what it takes to design and what it takes to do the construction. But then you can be heavy on terms of operation maintenance. For example, NTSA is now employing, for example, civil engineers directly from the university who will be in charge of safety. And one of the things the board told us when we joined in our induction is that they require even somebody who's going to do safety, or even now there's that inspectorate, building inspectorate. They require you for the time, by the time you are inspecting a building, or this is your core function, you must know good understanding or a basic understanding of design and of construction for you to do inspection of buildings. For you to do safety of roads, you have to understand how a road is designed, what are the requirements, whether there's a bridge, what is the market. So you require a good, at least some understanding to that level, but your detailed report can be on O&M. That is one of the things, the current system that we have. I know other countries, somebody can get registered as a contract. Somebody just deals with contracts, an engineer based on that one. But currently, you must have some good, at least some level of understanding of the other areas. But it will not mean that you cannot get registered if you have been in O&M, but you must demonstrate you understand some level of the other what is called of design and construction. That's the current system. Maybe with time, we will talk to, we'll raise it up and find out with time whether we can have other areas, but at least some basic understanding in Kenya right now, you have to be able to understand that. Abdi, are we together? The second question is sample reports. Again, maybe something that you can put forward to IEK and find out, but to me, the problem with sample reports is that, or templates, or sample reports is that people will tend to do a lot of copying and pasting. To me, if it's possible to come out with clear guidelines, the guidelines we have, we put them in a way that either both at the university level and you start working, you and your mentor have very good guidelines that are needed to get you to that point of getting a good report. Because virtually anybody who does engineering is a very bright chap. That is one of the things we have to agree on. What makes things not done properly is because either somebody does not put so much focus on in terms of what they need to get done, but it's not because they don't have the knowledge. So to me, if we can give guidelines and people are motivated and mentor in the right direction, I'm sure most engineers should be able to write a fairly good report. But on the other hand, maybe it's good with time that we appreciate. Maybe IEK should be given an award for yearly who has given the best report. To me, there's nothing wrong in actually appreciating when somebody has gone beyond the average engineer and done a good job. To me, it's well to be appreciated. But the 2 points, definitely I'll take them up, but I'll encourage you if you're doing O&M, because I work for KETRACO, we have engineers who are on O&M, some are in design, some are in planning, and I keep on telling them they have to know what cuts across to their department, so it's important. I've met people work with consultants who only do designs, and it's really sad when you ask somebody to go back and get additional experience because you ask them, what's the difference? Actually, this is a question I once asked an engineer from a consultant, what's the difference between a tender document and a bid document? And unfortunately, the engineer had no idea what's the difference between the two documents, and it's because of the exposure that come up. But the person was quite good in design, but in some level of very good in supervision, but when it comes to contract management, they understood nothing. So I really request you to go beyond and get some knowledge in terms of what happens in other areas.
All right. Thank you, engineer, for that. Abdi, one question, please. Let's move. I think engineer has tried to answer your question, and then we have several questions here.
No problem. I just want to make one single remark, then I give him time to others. Engineer, the reason why I was asking the issue of having samples is one. For the issue of the interview, for the interview alone, it carries 50 marks. For the project itself, only 20 marks. For the experience and training, 10 marks. So the most part of the marks is carried by 50 marks, which someone cannot copy at the end of the day. So that is the importance of now giving people at least samples so that they can have clear guidance and they do the right thing instead of now struggling outside here.
I personally, I think there is no need for a sample. There is need for a proper template that is set so that people can just maybe fill in what is required, not the sample, the template, because the sample is to give you, we know this document is not subjected to some plagiarism checks. So somehow people might end up copying. But I think having a clear template, so whereas if I'm an electrical person, civil person, I know this is the template, I download it and I fill whatever is required from my side. I think that's the most important thing, the template. Now, I have somebody is asking, evening engineer, is there a requirement for number of CPD points one has to accumulate before registration? I don't think there is that requirement, engineer. What do you think? Hello.
Hello, Ndolo, sorry, I lost you.
Yeah, somebody is asking, is there a required CPD points, a number of CPD points that is required for one to accumulate before registration?
Okay. Okay. I only sit in the panel in IEK. So far, it will be requirement. You know, it's a requirement by EBK. So I have to do a research and ask my colleagues in EBK whether there's a requirement. I know annually graduate engineers are supposed to accumulate 25 points per year, but I've not seen whether it's a criteria. Maybe it's going to be a criteria, but I'll quickly check up with EBK and find out on their side whether there's a requirement. But for corporate membership, we have not been asking. That is one of the requirements.
I think the requirement is for license renewal. Like even a graduate engineer, because you are registered in the EBK register, if you don't accumulate the 25 points, then even if you pay, then you will not give the certificate of good standing. That's one thing I know. But engineer, you can clarify and give us more information. Somebody asked another question here. How old should a project be? That one has been answered. The engineer will clarify whether it is 5 years or 3 years. Then Simon has a question. For structural engineers, how big a structure does the panel look at to determine whether the engineer has gained the requisite experience under the technical report? Is there a similar, English please, is it similar for road engineers, water, waste engineers, etc.?
Okay, for structural engineers, more or less, what you've been looking at is just a sample design of the various elements. For example, a beam, a slab, panel, column, a foundation. Actually, even one or two is enough. You don't have to, 2 beams are more than enough to the design. So it's just elements of everything so that when you go through the principle of design of a column, you actually have done a design. So it's not, you don't have to do anything more than one of each, maybe at most 2, but don't do more than 2 of any of the elements. So keep it simple, because just the principle that we want you to present in a drawing and for us to be able to ask you questions back later. So the building, again, I've seen some people asking, I know this one was not asked here, but somebody asked me elsewhere, the building can be reinforced concrete, can be steel, doesn't have to be, there's no particular, even can be a timber, as long as you've done enough elements for us to be able to make it, to ask you questions and confirm whether you actually, and you're competent as an engineer, you understand the codes, you understand how to apply them, you understand the needs of the client, you understand the loads, you understand the design, you understand the output, makes sense. To me, that's what you're looking at. The other issues about whether water engineers, and that again, I have to talk to my colleagues and find out in a road what is the minimum that has to be done. So I've been more in terms of structural. That's where my key competence is.
All right, I think as we go by slowly, we will get more engineers also to present maybe a project on roads or water. If you are in water waste, you can also look at Engineer Lucy's webinars on YouTube, and you can learn more from her side also. There's somebody here asking, what is your take on the marriage between IEK and EBK? Sorry, the question is out. Yeah, what is it? Just ask, is it, do you think this is a healthy marriage or is a counterproductive one?
Okay, I'm not sure with the term marriage, but if you virtually look at any Commonwealth country, whether it's Malaysia, Hong Kong, UK, Australia, you always find there's that institution of engineers of whether of Hong Kong or whatever. Then you still have the regulator who is the board. So the board is very clear in terms of what they're supposed to regulate, because more regulations. The activities, actually most countries, when it comes to the CPD points, is the institution that does those activities, but in Kenya it's the other way around. Then the board will just confirm that you have actually met the requirements of IEK. But the two elements go together. So I don't think there's a marriage, it's just that everybody has their space. And if well done, then we can actually be getting support from both sides, and they can work together. So that's what I can actually say for now.
I myself personally think the marriage should be a healthy one rather than being a counterproductive one. It's just that our management should try to set priorities and take the lead in making sure that the marriage is not causing loggerheads here and there. Like when you have a document that is not being looked at EBK and one document comes from IEK, somebody has passed an interview on one side and is not being allowed to go through in the other side. So that marriage should continue. Can you hear me?
Hello? Sorry, yeah. I lost you.
Yeah,
I lost you.
I was saying that the marriage should be a bit mutual, and we should respect the marriage. If it continues, then it has to, every side has to agree, because IEK is having 4 members directly from IEK as nominees from IEK. So out of 9 commissioners at EBK, it shouldn't be counterproductive. It is actually supposed to be productive, because IEK is supposed to be fighting for the welfare of members. Abdi is asking again, the problem statement for structural, what is needed? What did you present in terms of the problem statement in your project as a structural engineer?
Oh, me?
Yes.
Okay, mine was more than, it was 2 decades ago. So, but definitely mine was, we are putting some houses for the, I think that was Moi Air Base, if I'm not wrong. So being able to articulate what are the needs of the Air Force, why they needed to put up a facility, and what they're going to use it for, and who are the beneficiaries. So in structures, because most of the work is done by architects, so we had to borrow quite some information. But that's the whole thing in terms of being able to define what the problem was in terms of meeting the need, and in terms of various options, in terms of, because they could have built things using different materials, why this was chosen, why the site was chosen. It was around that, but I said it was 20 years ago plus. So, but it rotates around that.
Yeah. So I have one question regarding now, say, for example, those who have graduated from outside. And for example, I graduated from outside. I ended up working outside before coming home, and then I left again. Now, what if like right now I have a project and I would like to write on it and give it. am I supposed to directly have a PE in Kenya, or I can, whatever work I've done, it can be looked at by the PE in Kenya and mentor in the document that I've done and present?
Okay, again, my personal opinion, I gave my disclaimer early enough. To me, definitely, I have no problem in somebody having a project that was done outside the country, was supervised by somebody. I guess there's going to be authentication of the documents that this person is registered within their own country. The other thing, but always remember that, as you said, 50 points go to the interview. That's where we'll actually find out whether you have the understanding of what you have put on the paper, whether you're presenting yourself as a true representation of the experience you mentioned, or you're just somebody, a pretender. You'll be definitely caught in the interview, which is a bigger part of it. So personally, I have no issue in terms of somebody having worked outside and prepared a document and is signed off by somebody with experience out there, and he brings the document and we interview based on that. But again, I said, I need IEK to authenticate whether that is acceptable. But since we're looking at whether you have understood the principles of engineering, you have reached a level of experience, you are mature in judgment, and you're competent, and you can actually take responsibilities. This has nothing to do with whether the project was in Kenya or the UK or wherever it is going to be. Personally, that's my opinion.
All right, thank you, engineer. Any other question? I think somebody has a very long question here. Let me see if I can get it. This is from Tom. I'm a construction manager. I am in the construction management side of the industry. When presenting in front of the panelists, do I have to talk about structural bit? Also, I'm working abroad. If I get a PE license abroad, does it hold water back home, or will I have to go through another process again?
Okay, the second part of the question, I think it requires somebody from EBK to confirm. Let me not speculate, because this is the first time I'm hearing about the case.
Yes.
I know Kenya, our East African countries, they signed off some MOUs to agree where you can actually transfer, or you can do your services across the border. So I guess if it's Uganda and Tanzania, that should be fairly simple. To me, again, my personal opinion, I have friends from the UK, I have friends from Malaysia, and I've understood the system, and quite a number of things are quite similar. And to me, it should be fairly quite simple. But again, I would want EBK, or even maybe, since the president sits in the president-elect sits in the World Engineering Forum, maybe should be able to give us a better guidance. But to me, personally, I have no problem, but we'll need to get policy direction from EBK and I. The first part of the question was regarding the construction manager, and he wanted to, I missed a small part of it. Engineer Dolo?
He says, it's a bit long, that's why we missed it.
So he has experience in construction management?
He says, I am in the construction management side of the industry. When presenting in front of the panelists, do I have to talk about the structural bit?
The part of it, as I said earlier, the current system that we have in registration, both EBK and IK, it requires somebody to show they have experience in both the design part of it, some level of experience, and also in terms of managing contracts and supervision. So he has to package himself in that he shows himself capable cutting across the various areas. So that's going to be important. But to me, I can always give him my contact and go into more details to look in terms of his documentation and really understand, to be able to guide him in more details. But briefly, that's what I'll be able to answer for now.
All right. And does experience matter for one to have regarding the supervisor, the mentor?
Whether the person should be experienced?
Yes. What's the minimum experience of the mentor required? Is there any number that is given?
Not that we have in Kenya. At least all the time that I sit in IK, we have never gone through, as long as somebody is registered as a professional engineer, that was sufficient as an experience, as competent in terms of to be able to mentor. I know some countries like Malaysia, they require to have 3 years experience. So you're not going to graduate today and start mentoring people tomorrow, because you have to get registered to be even a mentor. So it varies from country to country, but currently in Kenya, as long as somebody is a corporate member, is a professional engineer, they should be able to sign off documents.
Then is a panelist, is engineer a panelist at IEK? If yes, are you a member? Are you a panelist at IEK, engineer?
Yes, I'm a panelist at IEK. I said this. What I'm actually speaking, my guideline today is based on part of it is based on the experience I've obtained by sitting the panel at IEK. And
somebody is asking about postgraduate, but I don't think postgraduate studies really apply in the application, does it?
No, it's not a requirement. It's not one of the requirements.
Basically, it's the undergraduate degree that really matters. Abdi, you have a question. Let's give engineer a breather a bit, and then maybe we have another 20 minutes or so. All right, engineer, just take a small breather. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we join back in 2 minutes, please.
Okay.